Abuse is a big conversation, and for many different reasons. Because it's something we're becoming more aware of. There are so many things that happened in our childhood, and probably in retrospection, we just start feeling like it was not fine. And I remember an article that I read recently about someone trying to summarize how we say, I was beaten up, and probably my parents were very harsh, but I still turned out well. But then he was saying, what about the effects of that? We are dependent on drugs, we are in dysfunctional relationships, we are probably not sleeping at night because of anxious thoughts. And so it's being able to step back and ask yourself, how far is too far in terms of the things happening in my lives? And when you think about abuse, let me just give a working definition for the sake of this video series. We are talking about abuse as violation of your physical space. So anything or anyone violating my physical space, and physical space, like literally, is that space of the hula hoop. Like if you put it around your waist, that is your personal space. And so when you're thinking about abuse, it's violation of your personal space. And there are many forms of abuse. I know physical, probably sexual are the most popular ones, but we are going to delve into the other types as well, because sometimes one abuse always rides. There are always riders on that abuse of the other forms of abuse. And so we have physical abuse, which includes the sexual abuse and anything that is physically violating. And then we have emotional abuse. We shall also look into that. And then we have mental abuse. We have social abuse. We have financial abuse and spiritual abuse. And I don't know what you're most familiar with, but we are just going to go a bit deeper into these things so that we can just see how do we show up in a healthier way in those spaces. And before I also go any further, when you think about abuse, how do we show up into the abuse space? So there are 3 ways. Number 1, you can be a perpetrator, meaning that you are the abuser. And honestly, when you think about the other forms of abuse, most of us have abused. As much as I didn't punch you, I didn't lay my hand on you, it's possible that I've shown up in other abusive ways in different relationships in my life. And I need to take responsibility for that instead of feeling like a victim or feeling indifferent as if it's none of my business, it's none of my concerns. And the other way you can show up is showing up as a victim. And of course, the victim is the disadvantaged position where it's been done to me, poor me, will shame me, how did I end up here? And the problem with the victim space, it's a bit disengaging because you feel like you are the passive person in that space. And you are, just a victim, meaning that whatever is happening to you just goes because you feel helpless, you feel hopeless, and sometimes you also feel like the other person is more powerful than you are. And then number 3, you can also be living in between those 2 places because, like I've said, one abuse results into the other abuse, results into the other abuse, and so it can just be an endless loop. Sometimes I'm abusive today or in one relationship, and then in another relationship I'm the perpetrator, or probably I'm also in a relationship where we are reciprocating in abusive ways. And of course, that is an abusive relationship in that context. So let's dive in. Number 1, we have physical abuse. In physical abuse, it's just being able to see how I am formed and fashioned. In a way, I am not attached to anyone. Like I'm a complete person in myself. And guess what? Even children who are born together, they still come as complete units. There's nobody who needs the other to coexist. And so physical abuse and being able to set those boundaries comes from a place of healthy existence as an individual. I need to understand that I'm complete. I can function alone without anyone else. So first of all, just that awareness that God has created me as an individual and I'm complete how I am. And so everybody else who is coming into my space is coming to complement who I am, but not to validate who I am. And that makes a lot of sense for someone who's going through physical abuse and they feel like they have to stay because you're attached to that other person in a dysfunctional way. And so when it comes to physical abuse, I need to see myself as a complete unit with everything that I need. Can you imagine you don't need to depend on anyone for your digestion? You don't need to depend on anyone for your breathing. Like God has just wired us as complete beings so that within myself I'm complete. And that is such a deep place to live from. In a way, if anybody left my life, I will still be able to live. And most of the times, people who are victims of physical abuse usually feel like they need someone else or other people for them to be complete in their identity and in who they are. And so when you think about physical abuse, it's first of all being able to define your identity in terms of who am I? How do I show up as a complete person wherever I go in all my relationships? And physical abuse can come in form of violence, like in terms of being shoved, being beaten up, all those things, like in terms of someone comes at me in a way that is hurtful. Sexual abuse also comes in there. Of course, it's a whole entity by itself, because sexual abuse really changes your life in a very traumatic way if it happens to you. But then in the physical abuse, it's just that violation, and sometimes it starts subtly with the other forms of abuse that we're going to discuss later. But the important thing to note about physical abuse is that I should be a safe space to live in a way I'm not willing to allow anyone to violate that peace and to destabilize that space. Okay? And then physical abuse is all those altercations together. And then number 2, think about emotional abuse. And emotional abuse has to do with how it makes me feel, how someone makes me feel. Do I feel okay about it? And there's someone who said, if you're not sure whether you are in an abusive relationship or not, just listen to yourself. How do you feel? Whatever you're feeling doesn't lie. If you're feeling uncomfortable, it means there is discomfort that needs to be addressed. But physical, most of the times, the emotional abuse comes in form of emotionally how it makes me feel. And so I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm feeling a lot of shame and guilt and disgrace. All those emotions don't lie that you're in an emotionally abusive space. And emotional abuse, sometimes people who go through emotional abuse, most of the times there's a lot of minimalization, because you're like, okay, so have you been beaten up? No. Did anyone lay their hand on you? No. And why do you want to leave? But emotional abuse is very destructive in the long shot, because you can come to a place of emotional indifference where you don't feel anything, or you can also come to a place of emotional sensitivity where everything becomes a trigger and you're not able to function in a place of wholeness, in a place of reacting in a healthy way and responding to healthy ways in the different relationships you are in. And emotional abuse has to do with your emotions, and everybody from one point to the other, or at one time or the other, will go through lows and highs of our emotional space. But the problem is when your winter has stayed for too long. You just feel like this winter has overstayed. I don't understand why I'm still struggling with depression a year or 2 later. And fair enough, I love saying this as a thumb rule. Nobody should have more than 25% of winters in their lives. When it goes beyond there, it shows you need to seek help, because it's overstaying its welcome. So for example, in 1 year, we have 12 months. You cannot have a month of continuous anxiety for more than 3 months and you keep on normalizing it, or probably 3 months of anger and rage and you keep on normalizing it. You cannot be depressed for more than 3 months and you keep on normalizing it. And sometimes these things can happen in different pockets. But how is your recovery? Is it healthy? Like, for example, I am going through a difficult period of my life. Probably my marriage is not in a good space. Probably we have too many conflicts. If we recover from that season in a way that is not deeply resolved and it's not a healthy way of resolution, it means that problem is just carried forward. One way or the other, in a few months, a few days down the line, it will still surface up. And sometimes it's possible to deal with one emotional winter for many years, just that it's coming in small installments. And abusive relationships can feel that way emotionally. We have just been in winters, pockets of winters, but over the same situation. And that is why sometimes seeking help always helps you to just make a good decision, and also to make you come to a place where you're able to make better actions and to make bold moves to get out of that repetitive and that just cycle of self-defeat. I hope that makes sense.